Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I'm Community Engagement Coordinator here at Wheaton Public Library. Rachel Karasek is on staff at the Leishman Center for Culinary Health at Northwestern Medicine's Kishwaukee Hospital in DeKalb, Illinois. She will tell us more about their program, who they serve, and all the great free classes that they offer. But first, I know you have a couple of wonderful recipes to share with us, so I'm going to turn the camera over to you, Rachel. Thank you so much for doing this for us tonight.
Thank you, Barry. We are just so honored to be able to join you guys this evening. We love every time we get to interact with Barry and the Wheaton Public Library. So thank you so much for everyone who decided to spend this drizzly, Wednesday evening with us. We're so happy that you're here. So as Barry mentioned, my name is Rachel Karasek, and I am the one of the community education specialists here in the Leishman Center. And as she mentioned, we are located at Northwestern Medicine's Kishwaukee Hospital, so in DeKalb County. However, my role within Northwestern Medicine is to really serve and teach all of Chicagoland. So I'm a corporate employee. And so even though my physical location is here in DeKalb, we do offer many classes that have no charge associated with those. I'll talk about those at the end of the program, but I teach to everyone from, Wheaton up north towards Waukegan, down south to like Palos and Burbank, and then out here in greater DeKalb County. So that's just a little bit about what we do. And tonight we do have Marla, one of the nurses in our department. She'll be watching that chat. So feel free again to put those questions in the chat. But just as a reminder, if you haven't seen our programs or you're not familiar with the Leishman Center, what we do is we focus on cooking with whole foods. What research says is that the more we cook, the healthier we are, the less salt, sugar, and fat we have in our diet. So we just want to empower people to step away from too many packages and just start cooking at home more. So that's really the base of what we do. We have a very small team here tonight. My background's public health, but I do have our nurse Marla with me. And then we have a couple other staff members, one dietitian, another nurse, and then another culinary educator. So I hope if you like what you see here, you will join us for other classes that we have in the future through our program here. But let's get started. So light spring suppers. This is one of my favorite times of year to teach. Here in the Leishman Center, we do classes that range from seasonal to chronic disease prevention. But tonight, I really just wanted to hone in on it's April. We made it through the winter. Let's talk about spring. So now eating with the seasons is something that we've done like as humans for a very long time. In the winter, we crave things like squash, potatoes, whole grains, things that will almost kind of keep more meat on our bones, so to speak. And as the summer hits, with those warmer temps, when those go up, then we start to find ourselves craving things like tomatoes and cucumber, watermelon, things that are high in water content, helping us stay hydrated very naturally. So spring is this time of transition. I think that a lot of us are starting, our palates are craving something a little bit lighter. I always want like lemon and fresh herbs this time of year. However, it's still cold. Look at what we've had the last week. So with spring meals, I love to also offer warm meals. I don't think we're ready for just only cold salads. I think it's nice to have still something warm and nourishing, but also having in a little spring produce and some of those nice spring flavors. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. So we are going to do 3 different recipes for you. We are going to do a crustless quiche. We're going to do a lemon chicken orzo soup. And then we're going to do an arugula pesto. And I know this says like light spring suppers and pesto is not a supper. However, it's so versatile. I can talk about what you can do with it, how to just take something you know how to do. Maybe it's just an ordinary chicken breast or roasted potatoes, and how to just make them feel elevated and you're excited to eat. So we're going to get started. I'm going to move through the handout that Barry talked about in chronological order. So we're going to start with the quiche and we'll move on through. Feel free to take notes if you'd like. Feel free to just sit back, relax, and listen, whatever you enjoy, whatever you want to do. So for this quiche, normally when we think of quiche, we think of a nice custardy egg mixture inside a nice buttery crust. Now, I know that a lot of us love that, and that's awesome. I look forward to one like every kind of holiday breakfast. That's what we do in my family. But I think for the everyday, it's nice to have an option where we don't have as much of that kind of buttery crust. So we're going to do a nice spring version today. So the first thing we need to do is we need to preheat our oven to 400 degrees. And then once we do that, we need to identify a pan that we can cook our quiche in. So there's a couple different options. One, this is what I'm going to use here today. This is a cast iron pan. It has a natural kind of non-stick coating, as long as you warm it and keep it nice and seasoned with some oil. Another thing you could use is just a stainless steel pan. Now with these, just know that I like to add a little more oil because of the stainless steel, where the eggs are more likely to stick. If you have anything with an enamel coating, that's awesome. But if you have, say, skillets that only have plastic handles, they can't go from stovetop into the oven, they can't do both. Then what you could do, saute your onions, lightly grease a pie plate, and then you'll just make your quiche in here, which feels very familiar when we're talking quiche. But today I have my cast iron pan, and I can actually move this to the side now. And I have it at a very low heat. Cast iron is something that's very thick. So we are just going to let this very slowly heat up. And now I'm going to bring it up just a notch because we're going to get ready to start cooking. So the very first thing you'll see, we have two of the first ingredients is 1 tablespoon of olive oil. You're going to find that in all of our cooking, or at least all of my cooking, I usually like to go to olive oil. It's used in the Mediterranean eating plan, the DASH eating plan. It's really what we look at for having kind of a heart healthy fat. And so that's what you'll see a lot of our recipes utilizing. And the second is some onion. Now, this portion of the recipe, I realized there was a typo. It says 1/4 cup. I actually like to use closer to 3/4 cup. And so that's supposed to say 3/4. However, onion is something that's it's probably personal to you. If you don't love onion, feel free to cut it down. If you want to do more onion, I've done up to a full cup in this recipe. Now, the nice thing about the onion being the typo today is that the nutritional analysis on the very last page shouldn't be affected much. So I'm going to get about 3 nice green onions or spring onions. You could use just sliced or diced yellow onion. You could use chives. Chives are a little more mild in flavor, so maybe you'd want to do a little bit more of those. I personally like chives sometimes to garnish with more, so I get that fresh oniony bite. But a spring onion or a scallion or a green onion, I love in this recipe. So a spring onion is when an onion is very young and it's harvested before the bulbs swell, and it still has that tender green coming out of the ground. So that's what a young onion is usually just an onion that's young. Green onions and scallions, we can use those and spring onions kind of interchangeably. Spring onions you'll see here soon. I'm very excited. I'm a huge fan of Wheaton's French Market, and I see that they're opening this Saturday, the 12th. So Marla, we should take a field trip out some Saturday morning. Yeah. So look for those vendors that have those spring things, in May. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to start by cutting our green onions. So we get a lot of questions with green onions. What do I use? Do I use the white part? Do I use the green part? What we're going to do is we're going to use the whole thing. We're going to remove anything at the root, just because it carries some dirt. And then we're going to trim off anything that looks a little sad. You'll notice here that I actually have my green onions stored in water. This is how we store them. It could be a mason jar. This could be a small container. Store them in water in your refrigerator with a bag over it, just so it doesn't dry out. And you're going to end up having green onions that stay nice and fresh much longer than if you just keep it in that, simple bag that we get them in at the store. So change out the water like flowers. When the water gets murky or the tops look a little sad, give the tops a trim, and then you can change out the water if needed. So now if I have a bulb that's kind of larger than the others, I kind of just slice it in half so everything comes out similar in size. And so I find that the white of the onion's a little stronger and the green is just a little bit more mild. So again, use whatever you enjoy. So I have my onion all cut here. I have a nice warm pan. So I'm going to add about a tablespoon of oil. I'm going to add those onions in right away. And do you hear that sizzle? I don't know if you can hear it at home, but that sizzle is what we're looking for. That means that our pan was properly heated. So the proper heating of a pan can actually help us use less oil and still get a non-stick effect. All right, so I'm gonna let those just kind of hang out for a second. I'm gonna give them a little stir. And now, again, because I'm using a pan that can go from stovetop into the oven, I can just build right here. And I don't have to have any other dishes, just everything's going into this cast iron. So next, we wanna identify some kind of vegetable. I would say on average about 3 cups of vegetables. You could even go up to 4 cups into our quiche. So I'm using asparagus. This is something that is, for me, I really think of as being that like quintessential spring piece of produce. In Chicagoland, we're going to start seeing more local asparagus the end of April through mid-June. That's kind of the season. So be on the lookout for that. With asparagus, I grew up on a farm and we would always harvest it, and then we would just kind of take the stalks, and wherever it naturally broke is where we would cut them. So you can do that, or if you want, you can always just kind of trim the ends. And again, just like with the green onions, I store them in water. It keeps them nice and fresh. And so now I'm just going to do a nice rough cut. Onion or asparagus can really vary. You can have a really thin little piece of asparagus, or you could have a really giant kind of thick stalk. I would cut the thicker stalks a little bit thinner just to make sure that they cook through nicely, because we're not even sauteing these. And because asparagus cooks so quickly. So say you're not a huge asparagus fan. I know one of the nurses in our department, she's not. And so she goes, I would like to use broccoli in this. And you can. If you have something like broccoli, a potato, a sweet potato, something heartier, what I would do is suggest putting it in and kind of cooking it with the onion to begin that cooking process. But anything that cooks quickly, like asparagus, tomatoes, leafy greens, a zucchini, anything that's kind of higher in that water content, feel free to just put in raw, and it should just cook within the egg dish as it's in the oven. And you're going to end up not with a mushy asparagus, but it's going to be nice and tender, but maybe just have a hint of crispness. So once my onions begin to kind of turn golden brown, we can actually bring the camera down here, Marla, if we want to show them. So Marla's going to come bounce over here to our up close camera. All right. And let me know, Marla, if I need to change the pan. You can see there's some that are just getting a little bit golden brown. And now I'm just gonna put in my asparagus. And honestly, you can just kind of pat that down. And then on top of this, we're gonna add some cheese. So what type of cheese do you enjoy? What type of cheese does your family enjoy? I love a really kind of salty, briny feta with my asparagus and with my spring flavors, about a half of a cup. If you wanted to use a Gouda or a Swiss, a cheddar, feel free to shred it. And again, just lay it on top of the vegetable. All right, Marla, we can come back up front. So now what we're gonna do is we need to whisk our eggs. This recipe calls for 8 eggs. And then we're gonna add to it 1 cup of milk. And so I'm gonna use a low fat milk just because we teach based off of a lot of recommendations by the American Heart Association. However, I know that if you're at a restaurant and you get a really good piece of quiche and it's kind of custardy, that's usually made with heavy cream. So just know that yes, it can be made very rich and, you know, decadent, but we can also make it with just some low fat milk and it's still gonna come out just beautifully. So I added my cup of milk, and then this is an optional ingredient, is some sort of spring herb. So classically, asparagus and tarragon, fresh tarragon go really lovely together. However, I don't think just everybody has tarragon hanging out in their kitchen at all times. So this could be chive, this could be some dill, this could be a little parsley, just even for some color. I'm just gonna use a little chive. Yes, it's another onion flavor, but it's a little different. And again, adds a little interest to this. But this is optional. If you're someone who loves a certain seasoning, maybe, you know, dried thyme, feel free to add that into the egg mixture here. And now using a whisk or a fork, I'm just going to just kind of lightly whisk my eggs. And so what we're looking for is we want all of the yolks to be broken up. We want all of the whites to be broken up. And what we want is just this creamy yellow custard. And so I do try to beat a little bit of air in there because that's when we get that nice, when we pull it out of the oven, it's nice and fluffy. We will eventually kind of lose that. And then to this, I'm also going to add a little bit of black pepper. Now I think you could also use a little salt if you want. However, with this dish, I'm using that bright, briny, salty feta. And so when I do that, then I want to stay in control of how much salt there is. So then I'm going to refrain from adding salt to the eggs. But this is a personal choice for you, whatever you would like to do. Then over the asparagus, I just simply pour my egg, herb, and milk mixture. All right. And so remember, this doesn't have to look like just eggs and chives and green onions. That is very springy. This could look like bell peppers, and you could do like a spicy chicken sausage with salsa and serve it with salsa and avocado. This could be peas if you wanted, like some peas and asparagus and mint, you know, to top it with for really a very springy quiche. So use whatever you like, but this is what we have here. I'm gonna pop it into the oven for about 35 to 40 minutes, just because we know everybody's ovens are different. And we're gonna see that towards the end of class. So I'm gonna pop this right into the oven. Make sure you put it on the middle rack. And actually, I like to always, whenever I'm baking eggs, I always like to put a baking pan underneath it on the lower rack, just in case there's any egg spilling. So that's what I'm gonna do today. So I'm gonna set my timer for about 30, I'll do 30 minutes, we'll check it then. And so while I was kind of talking about this recipe, if you're thinking, okay, we're talking about spring suppers, is this really a supper? Quiche can be made for breakfast. It can be enjoyed for brunch, lunch, dinner. I love this for dinner with just some roasted potatoes or a salad on the side. But if you make it for dinner, it's really great to have as leftovers for the next day's breakfast, for a quick lunch that you can eat cold, warm, hot. So it's just very versatile. So it's a great dish that I wanted to share with you. All right, so any questions on that dish specifically? All right, I'm going to start gathering all of my ingredients. And if you want to flip the next page, we are going to start focusing on a lemon orzo chicken soup. So I'm going to bring my tray over here. All right. So funny story. The other day, I guess a little history. Anytime I teach a class, which is weekly, that's always what my family kind of eats the week before or the week before. I'm always kind of testing, making sure I'm familiar with the recipes. So I made this soup last weekend. And then one day I came in early this week and had my soup for lunch. I had a nurse in here who was warming up her lunch. And I said, what are you making? Or what are you warming up? And she said, last night's dinner. She goes, soup. And I said, what kind of soup? And she said, chicken lemon orzo. And I said, no way, that's exactly what I brought. So this soup recipe is floating around in a lot of different websites and blog posts. It's kind of popular. I think, again, we're craving a little bit of warm food, but we want that lighter flavor. So this nice lemon flavor. This is kind of an elevated chicken noodle soup. So don't feel intimidated if you haven't cooked with orzo or you haven't had lemon in a savory application. This is really, really easy, and it's a nice recipe to make. So we're going to start by heating up. I have here a Dutch oven. This could be a stock pot. If you have a stock pot that is just thin, you don't have to warm it up. It's just because I have this, cast iron pan that's enamel lined. So I'm just going to let that slowly warm while I kind of get all of my mise en place in place. So all of my individual little pieces that I need prep done for. So the first thing that we need to do is chop celery. I have that done here. And then the next thing is some onion. So you could use the spring onion that we were talking about earlier. You could use a white onion, or I'm sorry, a yellow onion, whatever onion you enjoy. I thought let's talk about leeks. Leeks is something that you may find in a store. Maybe you see them in the summer. They grow in very sandy soil. And so leeks can grow around here. I've tried my hardest. I need to take the class on Monday Barry was talking about because I don't really have that green of a thumb, but I try. But leeks, sandy soil, they really mound the soil up over the root. So when they grow inside the layers, these do get quite dirty. Hence why I have another cutting board over my cutting board. So now with the leek, this is a very sweet, kind of mellow onion. It doesn't have those like really powerful smells or nothing that will make you cry, just known as being very mild. So, and very subtle. So with the leek, we have the root, this kind of tender white part, and then that kind of ombres up to this dark leaf. Now, unfortunately, we're going to cut off the dark leafy top. And this is not something that we can just saute and use. It tends to be more fibrous. So what you can do is feel free to put this into a Ziploc freezer bag or into some kind of freezer safe container and just save odds and ends of onions and carrots and you know, maybe a potato that's a little wrinkly, and then make your own veggie stock. But this is a great thing to use in there. And then I'm also going to take off the root of this. All right, now for the part that we're going to see, is this dirty? Let's see how dirty it is. So I'm going to slice this down the center lengthwise. And then it has all of these layers. And so I actually flip through them like a deck of cards. I cannot believe that. It is the cleanest leek I've ever seen. Just when I want one that's gonna show you, there's no dirt. But normally there is dirt. So what you would do is you would go run this under running water and just kind of flip through it until it, you know, became nice and clean. So now with these, once I do that lengthwise cut, all I'm gonna do is make these into thin kind of half moons. But again, this doesn't have to be a leek. This could be just any kind of onion you enjoy in your soups. So we're after about 1 onion, about 1 cup chopped. I don't know, I think that might give me my 1 cup chopped. So we're just gonna leave that there. So I am going to check my pan. I kind of am seeing if there's any heat rating up against my hand. I am gonna add another tablespoon of oil. You never want to add oil to a scalding hot pan. We just want it to be nice and warm. And then I'm seeing my oil just naturally move, so I know that it is nice and warm. Now I'm putting in my onions again. I'm hearing that sizzle. We actually have mindfulness in the kitchen classes because cooking can be such a mindful activity. It's part of our mental health initiatives here at Northwestern Medicine. So we do have classes where we talk about mindfulness, using your senses, and how I think something that causes a lot of people maybe stress, can we twist it and can we actually find joy in the everyday cooking? All right. So then I have some carrots already cut, and I wanted to show you, I do like to cut some things ahead of time for the week. I'm a mom of a little 3-year-old boy and a 6-year-old boy, busy family. And so my husband and I will try to do a little bit of prep throughout the week. And so I like cutting carrots or celery, having things done in the fridge to make dinner easy when we get home. If you do that with the celery or the carrots, just lay a damp paper towel over it to kind of help it not dry out and stay crisp. But I also wanted to show you how I cut my carrot. So with the carrot, we need about 2 cups for this recipe. And if you can find spring carrots, it's way too early. Right now, carrots are usually being planted. And so we're not gonna have carrots until about late May, early June. But those carrots that come from the ground from your local farmers, wow, are those so delicious. Local grounds, they do all come from the ground. But so what I'm gonna do, because this rolls, what I like is to kind of cut it into smaller segments, so it's a little easier to handle. And then slice down the center again, so I have a nice flat base. I'm gonna give my onions just a little bit of a stir. Once I have that flat base, some of the ends of carrots are kind of thinner, some at the top are a little thicker. So then I just kind of cut the thicker pieces of the carrot in half again, just so everything's similar in size, so it cooks at the correct time. And so now I'm just going to do a very kind of rough chop. And so I did this for about 3 large carrots.
Rachel, there's a question if you peeled the carrots or not.
So that's a great question. So if you, I think that it depends on kind of your preferences. If you like to buy organic, I would just give them a good scrub. Sometimes if there's a really thick skin on there, organic or not, I do take it off just because sometimes I find there is a little bitterness. But if you have a carrot that you can tell it's not a thick skin, I'll just take a vegetable brush it off under running water. And then I leave some of the peel on, because what we've found in research is that actually the peel of the apple, the carrot, a lot of the time holds a lot of the fiber, and that's what we want more of. So I left it on. I'm also a very rustic cook. So if you're someone who really loves that crisp, orange color, feel free to take it off. Good question. So now I'm adding in my celery and my carrots. And what we want in an ideal world is to cook this mixture for about 5 to 7 minutes. So with soup is something that you develop a lot of flavor early on in the pot. And so for me, it's crucial. I love to really almost caramelize my onions, get some nice caramelization on my carrots or whatever I'm using as an aromatic. And so I like to cook this sometimes even up to 10 minutes to really develop that flavor. If we just kind of throw it in the pot, give it a quick stir, add in our stock, yes, they will become tender as it simmers. However, we're still going to get that kind of pungent onion flavor in the end of the dish. And so give it time. Today, I'm not going to give it as much time because we do have other, things to do and other, I can't do everything as nice and slowly as I want to, but we are just going to let this cook while I talk about the next ingredients. So after about 5 to 7 minutes, I will say towards the end of that time, I'll add in a little bit of garlic that I have chopped here. And then once we give that whole 5 to 7 minutes with the aromatics, once that's done, then what you do is you're going to add some different dried herbs. So we have today some dried parsley, some dried thyme, and then we also have some bay leaves. So parsley and thyme, parsley is one dried herb that for me, I don't get a lot of flavor from it, but I love the green hues in the soup. Dried thyme is actually probably my favorite dried herb because it goes well with so many things. So in your cooking, in your everyday life, if you don't know what dried herb to use, thyme plays well with kind of everything. So I like to kind of take these herbs, crush them in between my hands when I put them into the pot. And then with our bay leaves are used to give a nice savory flavor to rice dishes, stews, soups. And so these are something that you might have found in like rice, like a burrito bowl. I know there's a popular chain that uses these in their rice, and people find them and they think they would get soft like spinach, but they don't. So with your bay leaves, you want to crack it to release those oils into the broth. So we're going to add those here shortly, along with some stock. So we're going to pretend 5 to 7 minutes is about up. So I'm going to add my garlic in. Give it a good stir. And at this point in the cook, you might start seeing there's a little bit of caramelization around the bottom of the pan. That's good. That's some flavor we can collect before it burns. So take a little water or a little broth. Splash it on the part of the pan that's collecting those sugars from the carrots, and then just scrape it. So now that I have my garlic in here, I'm also going to add my dried herbs, as well as my bay leaves. And then I'm going to add about 6 cups or 1.5 quarts of chicken stock to my stock pot. Now, if you're making this recipe at home, at this time, you would also add your 1.5 pounds of raw chicken. And so what happens now for the next, 10 minutes. We try to bring it up to a boil. Once it boils, bring it down to a simmer for about 15 minutes. So all day, about 25 minutes, we're just simmering chicken. And that is going to allow more flavor to get into our chicken broth. And it's also going to cook the chicken at the same time. Now, because of timing today, I didn't want to do that to you and make you have to wait around. So I do already have my chicken done. So just know that while I'm simmering this right now, I'm just trying to kind of tenderize the vegetables, get as much flavor out of the bay leaves that I can. And we're just going to kind of let this simmer. If you were making this at home, after that 25 minutes, you would remove the chicken breast, shred it, and while you're shredding it, you would add in your orzo pasta, and you would just kind of let it cook for about 5 minutes. And then, because orzo is so small and cooks so quickly, what you would do is you would, by the time you're done shredding your chicken, after that goes in, you're going to turn off the heat when the orzo is about halfway done. So according to the package, it says 9 minutes total. 9 minutes total, 9 to 10 minutes. So after about 5 minutes, just turn off the heat and you would add back in that chicken, add in your lemon juice, and you're done. The orzo carries over. So right now I'm just gonna let this kind of have some time to build some flavor. But I did already shred my chicken. I do have my orzo ready to go, but I will add these here in a little bit. Yeah, Marla.
Rachel, question on what brand chicken stock you were using tonight?
I really like Chicken Basics. Thank you for saying that. I always like to purchase unsalted. That's what we do here with all of our programs is, again, because anytime a manufacturer wants something to taste really good, they're always going to add a little bit more salt than we're comfortable with probably. So I have Kitchen Basics unsalted chicken stock, but honestly, I'll buy whichever store brand, just for a cheaper price. So like Woodman's, I'll use whatever they have, just unsalted. That's what I like to have. But Kitchen Basics, I'm happy with. I like the flavor. All right, so the last 3 ingredients here, we will add just in a little bit because it throws together so quickly. So now what I want to do is I'm going to start on a pesto, and then during that making of the pesto, I might kind of add our chicken back in. Yeah, Marla?
Rachel, the question is, what is the difference between broth and stock?
Okay, that's a great question. So stock is typically made with more bones. So it's more just like the bones, getting a lot of flavor out of those. Broth is more, has meat on the bones. And so usually you have some meat with that. And so there is a difference, but I know that we typically use the words interchangeably. And why bone broth is called bone broth actually drives me crazy as someone who really loves to research food. But traditionally, stock is made with just the bones. Broth has a little bit of meat still on the bones. All right. All right.
You like to freeze your soup?
I do. I love to freeze soup. So with soup, the only thing with this soup is specifically the orzo is so, or really any pasta, chicken noodle soup, the pasta is going to get really soft as it sits in the broth and will kind of expand. And if you freeze it, it'll break down even more. So what I would do is if you really love this soup, if you make it and try it, I would just do all of my vegetables, my chicken, you can even do the lemon, but I would then cook the orzo or the pasta, when you pull it out of the freezer and you maybe throw it in the crock pot, then cook it and then add it in. So, and you'll also see there's notes here about how to avoid soggy pasta. So feel free if you find that you really want to hold this all day for you want to make it in the morning, hold it in your crock pot for a dinner party. Maybe don't add in the orzo, add it in towards the end, or cook it until you're happy with it and add it right before serving. And you'll also see there's crock pot instructions here for any of you crock pot fans. All right. So I am now going to work on some pesto. So I don't know about you guys, but if anyone has made pesto before, there's nothing like it. Yes, store-bought pesto is delicious, but homemade is just delightful. So pesto is a traditional Italian sauce that was originated in Genoa, Italy, and we know it as that very traditional basil, parmesan, lots of garlic, olive oil. And traditionally they used to use a mortar and a pestle. Today we don't have a mortar and pestle here, so we are utilizing a food processor. And so this is how we make our pesto. But instead of the traditional basil, we're gonna take a spring green known as arugula or rocket, and we're gonna make a pesto out of that. So when you purchase arugula, say you're at the French market in Wheaton and you find someone, I know there's like, I think there's a stand called Rustic Roads. They do really great stuff and it's always very seasonal. I've been to their farm and it's fun to see them actually, it's fun to see where everything grows and you know it's truly produced there. But there's a lot of great ones that go there. If you purchase it from the farmer's market or a farm stand, you're going to find arugula is much peppery than what we're used to when we buy it at the store. So, but if you buy it at the store, what I like to do is if you have it in a plastic container, when I get home from the store, I always nestle in a paper towel to make sure that if there's any excess moisture in the center, it kind of gets, it keeps it dry. So I always really look at my box, make sure that there's no kind of soggy pieces of arugula or whatever type of green around the base. And then when I get home, I always do this. All right, so I'm gonna start with my pesto by just adding my garlic clove alone into the processor. When we pulse this, I wanna make sure that the garlic is chopped really fine. I don't wanna have like that really strong garlic breath. I wanna make sure it's evenly distributed. So now I'm gonna pulse, which means when my hand goes down on the pulse button, it's gonna spin the blade as fast as it can, but when I lift up my hand, it will stop. So I can actually kind of give it a chop. So now I have a really finely chopped garlic. And now to this, I'm gonna add 4 cups of arugula. So that is, you can measure it. I just do a loose handful is about 1 cup. All right, and I kind of see what's happening here. I'm seeing that we're finally getting to a simmer and I know I have about 5 minutes left on my pesto. So I'm gonna add in my orzo. Bit of good stir. We always joke, our classes are very real life. We're gonna do things, we're gonna try to kind of balance things as you would at home. Give it a good stir, and we're just gonna let that cook for 5 minutes. All right, so we have this in here, our arugula. And now I'm gonna add about 1/4 of a cup of basil. I'm sorry, 1/2 of a cup of basil. So when I measured it at home, it's almost exactly one of these packages. So we're just gonna add the whole thing. If you don't have basil, feel free, you could do parsley, you can just do arugula. But I like basil because it kind of ties in that very authentic traditional pesto flavor. Next, we're gonna add a 1/2 cup of some kind of nut. So we know traditionally pestos are made with pine nuts. Pine nuts are not always the most cost effective. They're delicious. And if you wanna make it with that, awesome. I like to use slivered almond. I like that it's just very plain in color. I don't find it to have a, really kind of bossy flavor to it. But if you love, say, pecans, walnuts, pistachios, all of those would work great too. Use whatever you have. But I'm gonna use a 1/2 cup of almonds. Then we're gonna add a half cup of cheese. So yes, it's a lot of cheese, but this is also kind of the base of the dish. And when you're utilizing pesto, realistically, you're gonna be taking maybe a tablespoon at a time. So you could use a Parmesan, you could also use a Pecorino Romano. And so there is a difference in those. If I'm someone who I love to kind of learn about food, I'm using Parmesan. Parmesan is a cow's milk cheese that is very nutty, a little bit more mild in comparison to the Pecorino Romano, which is a sheep's milk cheese, which tends to be a little tangier, a little sharper. So feel free to use whichever you like. Sometimes I just look at the store and whichever one, I see at Aldi's that's on sale, I'm like, that's what we're gonna use. All right, so we have everything in here. Now we're gonna all of the herbs in there. Now we're gonna add the juice of about half of a lemon. So for this, we need about 1 to 2 tablespoons, because the truth is, a little lemon that we get in the store often looks different than this giant lemon we have here. So about 1 to 2 tablespoons. And I always say, start with a smaller amount and you can always add more. So the lemon is gonna add a lot of acidity and brightness to this. So I just started with about a tablespoon, and then we'll taste and adjust at the end. All right, next I want you can choose if you want to add a little bit of salt. I'm not right now because I think the cheese should do the trick. However, salt is also a harmonizer, so we'll see at the end. But if I can try to not use it, then I try not to.
Rachel, can you talk about the reamer that you use to juice the lemon?
Sure, this is just a wooden reamer. Truth be told, because we teach here really all socioeconomic backgrounds, I'll say this is a great tool to have. I love using the reamer for fresh juice. I think we just got this at like Bed Bath & Beyond back when there was one. You could get this anywhere. We just like the reamer, we like the wooden reamer, just the way it feels. Another thing that works is just a fork. Putting the 4 prongs of the fork into the juice of the lemon and just twisting, that will also do the same thing. So, good question. All right, just giving this a quick stir. All right, so now, without adding the oil or the water, I'm gonna pulse this. So what we have here is this kind of crumble. It's the nuts, it's the herbs, it's the greens. It smells incredible already. And now traditionally in pesto, if you look at most recipes online, you're gonna see a third of a cup, a half of a cup, a full cup of olive oil. What we like to do in here is start with a lower amount and add a little bit if we need it. But we also like to thin with water. We do the same thing with hummus, even though this is a great monounsaturated fat, it's still a fat, and it's still something that, even too much of a good thing can still be too much. So just really being cautious and adding a little less than we normally do. So with the blade running, I'm gonna add about 2 tablespoons. I'm starting to get kind of a paste. This is really up to now you. Do you want it to be that drizzle that you put over pasta? Do you want it to be more of a thicker consistency, like a spread to use on sandwiches or crostini? It's really, really up to you. I'm now gonna thin it with a little water. Now I'm gonna take a rubber scraper, looking for a smaller one, kind of scrape down the sides, and then you can kind of see what you're working with. If you're curious, I'll show you. Let's do an up close real quick. It's like we have time. So far you see we kind of have this paste. So I'm gonna thin it down a little bit more, but if you wanted to stop here, you can always add more olive oil. And you can thin it out. So I'm gonna thin it out just a little bit more, and then we can see the soup, but actually let's stay down here. It sounds like our quiche is ready, so let's look at that too. Oh, wow. Pretty. All right, so coming out of the oven, how's that for you? All right, so here's our quiche. Too much wiggle, making sure, yep, it's pretty set, so I can turn off my oven. And now I'll let this sit for about 20 minutes before I cut into it. But this is our quiche with, look at how springy that is, how beautiful. So feel free if you wanted to use a fork or a knife, make sure there was no, no loose egg in the center. I feel pretty confident with that. So this is our first dish. And then Marla, we can come back up front. Now, part of cooking is very important that we taste and adjust. So I'm gonna taste and see what we have. It's pretty good already. I'm tasting things at different times. So the garlic is getting me later. First I tasted the herbs, I tasted a little lemon, then the garlic hits you kind of at the end. What that means is that we need some kind of harmony. We need it to come together a little bit more. So I'm gonna add just the smallest pinch of salt. When things don't make sense on our tongue, sometimes that doesn't translate that well and we go, oh, is it that great? Just a little pinch of salt. Now, if you also say you get a little bitterness from your greens, this is what happens when we work with nature. So it was grown in really hot conditions. You could always add just like a half of a teaspoon of a pure maple syrup that can help cancel the bitter. But I want harmony, so I want a little bit of that, and then I'm just gonna add about another tablespoon of oil. And a touch more water. We're gonna process, and then we'll taste again. I have a clean spoon, and let's see if that made a difference. Huge difference. I'm not getting hit with the garlic, maybe a little bit with the garlic at the end, but feel free now. When you're at home and you make this, feel free. Add a little bit of lemon, add a little bit more olive oil. What do you think it needs? Because it's ultimately really important that you enjoy it. But this is such a bright condiment that can be used for so many different things. We can use it for our frittata or our quiche. We can use it on our soup. We can put it just on a basic chicken breast that was grilled or rotisserie chicken, and it makes it interesting. Last night I had it on a shrimp bowl with just some basic brown rice and shrimp, and it just elevated it. You can use it as a sandwich spread instead of like a mayo. You can use it like on a chicken salad. So just know the possibilities are endless. I listed this in your handout, but I really want you to think about how you would use it. It's a great thing to just make, use it throughout the week and enjoy. So now that that's done, and our quiche is done, now the soup, I do want to quickly finish that out. I see my bay leaf is here, so I'm going to remove that.
Rachel, is it a personal preference using the chicken breast versus chicken thighs?
So I personally just like the breast because it's leaner. So I'm using the boneless, skinless. I really like thighs, I do. I find that they can sometimes in soup come across almost a little greasy. And so if I'm going to enjoy thighs personally, I like to get a little sear on them and have a little more texture on them. But just in general, for kind of leanness, heart health, we do usually boneless, skinless chicken breasts. That's a great question.
And how long would you leave the pesto in the refrigerator?
So There's a lot of factors that go into that. I wrote in the recipe about 3 days, and here's why. Because say your greens are kind of on their last day, they're not looking that great, I would not necessarily keep it much longer than you would the greens. Same with the cheese. What's the expiration date on that? But think about what happens when we have, you know, greens that have a little acid on them. They get kind of wilty and slimy. And so I usually keep this for up to 3 days. And it's just to make sure that the quality is still really good. All right, so now all I'm gonna do with our soup is, and sorry, we're just kind of sending you all over. Let's bring you back up front to show them, Marla. All right,
Did you want a close up again?
yeah, let's do
Okay.
it. So you'll see that this orzo is already almost creating this really nice, it's already cooked, kind of a thicker soup. So I will add a little bit more stock here at the end, but I'm gonna add in my chicken stock. Or I'm sorry, my chicken. Very rustic, very typical Rachel. Just kind of putting that in, stirring that in. And like I said, I added a little less broth than I normally would for the soup because I wanted you to see into the pan, and this was a lower pan.
And how would you store the leftover pesto?
So the pesto, I like to just put into an airtight container. I find that it doesn't really turn overly brown because of the acidity in there, that lemon. So in an airtight container in the refrigerator. Oh, it did have a seed. That one's gonna fight me. This is clean. All right. So then about 1 lemon. And then we're just gonna give it a good stir. And this is our soup. So again, remember this is a little thicker just because I didn't want to add the full amount of broth because I wanted you to see in, and I didn't want to use a big tall stock pot. But now you could top this with some chive, but how I like to serve this is in a bowl. And then I like to top it with our pesto. And so we could have spring carrots in here, spring onions. We have that arugula, so delightful. You could have the pesto on the eggs. So there we go. So Marla, I know we only have a couple minutes left, so let's move the camera back up front one more time. Sorry about going back and forth so much. But hopefully you got some new ideas for some spring kind of light suppers. And hopefully you just realize maybe you like arugula pesto. Maybe it's something that you'll try at home and you'll see how versatile it is, and just taking everyday meal prep like that cooked chicken or roasted vegetables and how it can just turn it into something exciting again. So if you have questions on these recipes, please let us know. I'd be happy to answer any questions. But just a little bit more about our programs. So we teach mostly half-hour programs. Sometimes we'll throw in 15-minute lunch programs. And every single week we teach on different topics. So for example, today I'm doing this, but then tomorrow, open to the general public, I'm teaching a class on how to create a fish packet. So empapillo. Last week, what did we teach last week? Next week I'm teaching this same thing with light. I have light, simple meals. In the next couple upcoming weeks, I have things like creative uses for canned tuna, simple meals for busy families. We're gonna do a whole array of different classes in May. So hopefully you look at our calendar, you'll find all of our classes at classes.nm as in northwesternmedicine.org. And once you go to that website, you'll see at our class page, you'll just go and click on Leishman Healthy Eating. And you'll find all of our programs listed through the end of May. And soon you'll see all of our classes listed through the end of August.
Rachel, can you freeze the pesto?
You can freeze pesto. So I would use it from your fridge in a few days. Or you can freeze it up to 6 months. So 6 months, it doesn't go bad after 6 months. It's just, again, quality. So what I would do is I would take parchment paper and maybe put this on a sheet tray or a sheet pan and a spoon. And then what you could do is say you live by yourself or you're the only one that would eat the pesto. Maybe you just want a couple tablespoons at a time. You can use an ice cube tray as well. And just kind of dollop the pesto on the sheet tray and then pop it into the freezer, obviously laying flat. Once the pesto is fully frozen, just kind of rip the parchment around it, fold up over it, and then throw all those little parchment wrapped pestos into freezer safe containers, a black bag, and then you can just take it out, thaw it, and utilize it however you want.
And then is it possible to slice a piece of the quiche so they could see?
Sure, we can
how that
try.
comes out?
Sure, usually we have about 20 minutes, but let's try it. Great. So, Marla, you can come down if they want to see.
Okay.
So again, remember, this isn't going to be perfect because it's still cooling. So you'll see we have the feta, we have our fluffy eggs. How's that, Marla? Is that okay?
That's good.
All right. And then if you were curious about, it came out pretty smooth. And then you'll see kind of, I don't know if you can see, not too wet. Yeah. So that's what the quiche looks like. Good question.
And then Rachel,
Yes,
the
then we can move back up.
website again for the classes?
Classes.
Do that one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Barry is going to send that out as well.
Oh, great.
That is classes.nm. So Northwestern Medicine, nm.org. Classes.nm.org. And that's where you can find our programs. All of our programs, there's no cost associated with those. We just ask that you do register. I will send out the Zoom link the day prior to class. And then it's just in the same format as this, usually just a little shorter. And every day is a different topic. So we'd love to have you. So if there's no other questions, thank you for letting me take up a few more extra minutes of your time. We appreciate you being here with us. And thank you so much, Barry, for allowing us to come back and cook with you all.
Thank you so much, Rachel. This was wonderful. Now we're all really hungry. But thank you, and we'd love to have you back again sometime. I see lots of gratitude in the chat, and thanks for answering all of our questions. It looks good. So thanks so much for being with us tonight, everyone. Again, in your follow-up email, there will be a link to download the recipes as well as links to access these additional classes and get more information about the Leishman Institute of Culinary Health. But again, thanks so much for joining us tonight. If you're watching the recording and would like those links, you can email me at ce@wheatonlibrary.org. That's CE for community engagement at wheatonlibrary.org, and I'd be happy to send those links out to you. But again, with that, we'll say goodnight. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.